Good morning, everyone. We're having a little technical working out as we start day 4 of our live stream open house at North Bennett Street School. My name is Sarah Turner. I'm the president at North Bennett, and I'm standing here in the violin making program, which will be one of 2 tours today. We'll be visiting the violin making program and also the jewelry making program. The person on the other side of this camera is Rob O'Dwyer, our Director of Enrollment and Admissions. And Rob, along with students and faculty, will be your hosts today. Rob will talk with students. He'll show you projects. You'll learn a little bit about the curriculum of our full-time programs. And behind the scenes is a team of people so that if you have questions during the visit and you want to put them in the chat, you can do that, and you'll see that your questions can get answered at the same time. So we just hope it's a great visit. We hope you learn a lot about what it is to study at the school. And even if you know you're interested in violin, I encourage you to stay for jewelry. You can look at the recordings from the past days. You might be surprised to find out that really you should be a preservation carpenter. Who knows? So enjoy your visit. I'm going to introduce Nathan Abbe, who is going to really be another guide to the violin program. Nathan is a graduate of our violin program and also one of our teaching assistants. So with that, I will turn it to Nate and to Rob, and have a great day.
Sarah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have fun.
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, everyone. And on that note, I think Sarah said something so wonderful just then about really getting to know the programs ahead of time and understanding yourself and what you can get out of them. I myself was interested in preservation carpentry at first, and in researching the different programs found that violin making was more suitable to how I like to work, the things I like to work on, and the environment in which I like to work. So I'd suggest keeping an open mind and really letting let yourself explore the various offerings from the school and keep an open mind to it. And now I'm in violin and went through the program. I'm the teaching assistant now, and I love being around here because the facilities are wonderful to work in. As you can see behind me, we have each student gets a bench, and we'll move benches through their time in the program, and it provides a great dedicated space to improve your skills and make the required 7 instruments that we need to graduate. One of the most important things in our program, which is the beginning of the curriculum, is sharpening, which is right next to me here. Our sharpening station is a dedicated space for us to really dial in the tools and make sure they're set up properly, as well as sharp as possible. And most of our work is without a mallet, so it's mostly hand carving, and we need very sharp tools in order to do that. We have Daniel here, who's sharpening up. What you got there, Daniel?
I have a block plane today.
Block plane. So block plane is one of our most used tools, and it needs to get sharpened occasionally. So Daniel's doing that. Typically, as a first-year student, a majority of the first week or 2 is spent sharpening, setting up your tools, and making sure that they're ready to use on the instrument. Daniel, what was it like for you as a first year?
It was challenging for sure.
Yeah.
It was a lot of hard work, a lot of testing myself and to see how hard I can work and how long I can last, and it was very rewarding, very rewarding.
What was maybe one of the biggest lessons you learned from sharpening?
To be patient.
Patience?
Patience.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to get to where you need to be, especially not only with the block plane, but with all of your tools. It's going to take time. It's going to take some practice, and it's not going to be perfect the first time. And so that's probably the best lesson that I've learned out of all of it.
What's your favorite thing to sharpen?
Probably this. It's the easiest to sharpen. It's very simple. It's very easy to see. The lines are pretty. It gets sharpened nice and polished, and it's perfect.
Do you want to talk about our sharpening system a little bit?
Yeah, so we've got 2 different sets of stones here. We have Shaptons and then we have Nanahones. The Shaptons go all the way up to 30,000, starting at 500, and then the Nanahones go from 200 all the way up to 10,000. The reason that we have 2 different types of stones here is because we use them differently. So the Nanahones, usually you use them on like your chisels and your gouges. They're a little bit softer than the Shaptons. And then for the Shaptons, you usually use them for like, say, your block plane or your knives. And we have these holders here that hold the stone on here so that you can have a nice firm grip on that so it doesn't move anywhere. And then we have the lapping stones. And what you do is, I'll show you, is that it's dirty here because I was sharpening. And you put the lapping stone on here. And you rub it back and forth. And what this is doing is it's flattening the stone. It's reflattening the stone. So, and that's about it.
Now, Daniel mentioned that we have stones that go up to a 30,000 grit. And if you have any experience with sharpening tools already, you'll know that it's a pretty ridiculous grit to work with. And many might suggest that it's useless. But
Okay.
we're not relying on any sort of stropping mechanisms or honing tools. We're honing on the stone itself and relying on creating a very flat, very reliable hollow grind surface that gets maintained up through all of the grits. And 30,000 is a great way to hone a flat tool like a chisel or a bench plane, block plane. And the 30,000, we find it really gives it that extra ability to last a very long time. You can use it for quite a while and it'll maintain that nice crisp edge. I think that's about it for sharpening. Maybe we can move over to one of the students' bench and see
Yeah,
what
that'll be
they're
great.
working on.
We'll follow you, Nathan.
Great.
Daniel, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Here we've got Elliot and Ada.
Hi, Elliot. Hi, Ada.
Third year now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what you're working on? And
Yeah. I'm working on doing the channel in this top plate. So eventually the purfling, which is the little black and white inlaid strip, is going to go through here. So you basically have the plate and it starts out kind of triangular, and then you join it, flatten it, get the outline done, and then this is sort of the next step from there. So here's a plate that I already have sort of the channel done on and the arching pretty much done. So this is where this is headed. This will be for the same instrument, but this one is just a little bit further along.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, so we pretty much do this process with mostly like gouges and thumb planes and some bigger planes, block planes, bench planes. We pretty much like to use whatever the biggest tool that we can is on these to get as consistent of a surface and just sort of have a consistent thing throughout the whole plate.
Cool. And I know you've been here for a few semesters. What, and as Nathan mentioned, I think you make 6 violins, a viola.
yeah, we do 5 violins, a viola, and an optional instrument.
Okay.
Which usually ends up being another violin, or some students will eventually make a cello if they're fast enough, and some students might choose to do a second viola as well.
Cool. And what I was wondering is, Elliot, what number is this for you?
Yeah, this is my third one, and then I also have a viola that's at kind of the same stage. and actually another violin that's at kind of the same stage.
Okay, so that's interesting. So do some people make instruments one at a time and finish them, or is it maybe more common like you? It sounds like you've got 3 instruments going at the same time.
I think it's a little bit of both. Generally, we will work on one all the way through, but just with some of the ways that things worked out with lockdowns and all, there were some projects that were started earlier.
I see.
Yeah, and just sort of going through steps that I already knew how to do, sort of before learning the other steps.
That's great. And in looking at this plate that you have here is this called a cradle?
Yeah.
I can see there's some like striations here.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's a certain kind of plane.
Yeah.
Is that the roughing plane that has kind of teeth on it?
Yeah, it has these little tooth blades in them. So I've actually got something in here, but
And I'm curious, what's the purpose for?
yeah, it's these guys.
Oh, that's cool.
Nice.
I guess it's for removing material, and then as you work finer, having those little ridges it makes it somehow easier to give it shape.
Yeah, part of what we like is that it just doesn't tear out the wood as much, because sometimes with a larger surface, you might sort of catch more of the wood at one time and then tear it out. And so this can allow you to remove wood relatively quickly without damaging it.
That's great. Cool. Thank you for sharing.
Of course. Yeah.
Would you also talk about, I see some tools on your bench.
Yeah.
This is, oh my gosh, I'm having a blank. I'm not a scientist.
Oh yeah, we've got our digital calipers here. These are Mitutoyo. They're pretty great. They're super accurate. I think they go down to 1/100 of a millimeter.
Okay.
And so we use these for a lot of our measurements. These are we use them on almost everything.
Right.
And then pretty much everything that we don't use that for, we use these calipers, which are like dial calipers, and they have a larger area so that you can measure sort of just things that are further in.
Nice. And because you're replicating historical instruments as part of the method of education here, I feel like tolerances are something that I hear about a lot, and I imagine these are tools that help you achieve what those high tolerances are.
Yeah, exactly. We do a lot of things to within at least 1/10 of a millimeter of what we're going for, but often a tighter tolerance than that.
That's great. Cool, thank you.
Of course.
Here's a question I have is, I feel like violin making is so specific and there are not a lot of entry points for people. There's no like, let's practice violin making to think, about how you want to do that. I feel like with our cabinet and furniture making program, fine woodworking has so many entry points for hobbyists to kind of take that popcorn trail to get there. What is that like for violin making, and if you would share your story, Elliot?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people come into it with an interest in violin. We definitely have a number of students that came through that played, that at some point sort of went to a shop and found an interest in it there. Personally, I wound up sort of starting playing, I guess I started playing music when I was about 2. I come from a musical family. And then pretty much at some point when I was in high school, I wound up enrolling in a violin making course at a community college. And then I started doing that and really liked it, and then wanted to pursue a full-time education.
That's great. Cool, thanks so much for sharing. All right, so I guess if you started playing music at 2, this could be for you.
Yeah, could be.
We have Ada, who's started with Elliot in the program.
Hi, Ada. Thank you, Elliot.
Of course.
What are you working on?
I have a viola here, which currently I'm working on F holes, the sound holes here, which is a lot of very precise cutting with a knife, because they need to be a certain width and the lines need to be very pleasing to the eye. So they're getting close. They're not done yet, but they're definitely starting to get close. This is a viola that I did CAD drawing of originally. So
Oh,
we
cool.
used the Francois Denis method, which is based on like Cremonese principles of shapes, and we drew it in Rhino 3D during the first COVID lockdown, actually. And then we just printed it out and made a template from this. So it's my own geometric construction used to make an internal mold, which is this shape here, and then we
Right.
make plates from that. So this is the back plate of the viola,
Cool.
which is completely done on the outside and on the inside, hollowed. And it's basically ready to glue onto the ribs, which are the sides of the instrument that go here. So it has purfling in it, has the whole arch done, all of the graduations done, so there's set thicknesses everywhere. It's thickest right about here, and it gradually thins out down to about 2 millimeters in some of these flanks here. So it's pretty flexible. You can even see it bending.
Wow.
And this helps make the sound amplified. And yeah, and then the top, the whole outside is done as well. These channels, the purfling miters, which are very specific to the maker that we're working from. So my first 3 violins were based on Stradivari instruments, and then this is based on a Andrea Guarneri viola. So he worked in the same city as Strad in Cremona, and was a similar time period, slightly older. And so I had to learn different stylistic shapes in these corners, in the purfling miters. The F-holes are different, so it's been a lot of changing up how I think about the stylistic parts after spending 2 years working really hard to get Strad shapes into my head. So that's been really interesting. I've really enjoyed it, especially with the scroll. There was quite a few differences in carving, just in like how the turns work and front profiles and side profiles, and the fluting here. So this is actually angled in this way, and it deepens as you get closer to the top. And just all these little stylistic details that we spend a lot of time focusing on here and are super important. So I've spent a lot of time like looking at photos of this maker's work, and I actually have a couple of them here just to help keep me on track. And yeah.
And is that the viola that you're looking to copy, essentially?
It's similar.
Right.
The outline of this is a bit different than that, but
Okay.
this is kind of the original inspiration. These F-holes are actually a direct copy of that. This is the template I have. It's just clear plastic.
Cool. And did you make that? That could probably be hard to see, I imagine.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, we make these. Nathan, our TA, had a drawing of it that he drew in the same Rhino program.
cool.
And yeah, we just use this thin plastic so that you can place it onto the instrument and trace around.
So the F-holes, their shape and their placement, that's really, some of it is, I guess, stylistic, but the main point is how do you get the sound to resonate
Yeah.
out of the cavity
Yeah.
of the violin?
So when I was first placing these, they were a little bit lower on the instrument. I drew it out on paper first, so I just had traced the plate and then did all the numbers to see how they were looking. And they were a little bit lower, and we decided to move them up so that this resonating area can move unimpeded. And if there had been a cutout down here, all of this would kind of be dead space because it was separated from the big body here. So this area is really important. This distance is important. How much space you have below and above is very important.
And then it looks to me, I don't know what these are called, but there's these tiny notches that are here.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I think about the work that's happening in here, I feel like you spend such an amount of time creating these, and these very kind of small actions that you take. I think it takes kind of an amount of courage, skill, a leap of faith in some way to get to this point where you're like, okay, now I'm ready to put these shapes in. And
Yeah.
I can see on on your template, it looks like there's little dots
Yeah.
where those might go.
Yeah.
That is, when might this happen in your process here? Is that kind of next on your list?
The notches will be the very last thing I do. So I have a little bit more shaping, especially in these eyes. I'm gonna widen them out a little bit. And then, yeah, the notches will be the very last thing I do when I'm happy with everything else. And probably what I'll even do is, right now this is still thicker. It's not finished on the inside yet.
I see.
So I'll probably thin it down to its final thickness. And then I'll look at the F-holes again and make sure I really like the shape. And then after that, I'll do the notches. And the notches guide where the bridge is placed when the instrument's finished.
Oh.
So they're
Cool.
pretty important, and both for looks and also to guide where you're going to put the bridge right centered between them.
And are you maintaining the thickness now because that adds to the strength while you work on other things?
Yeah, it adds to the strength, so like these wings aren't too flexible. It also is easier to cut a line on a thicker surface. We do a similar thing when we're doing the outline of the plate, where we leave it a couple of millimeters too thick and then cut it down later. So it's just easier to see that things are in the right angle. You're not like tilting your line way out. And it's also just easier to place your knife when you have more surface to register on. So.
Cool. I'm also seeing that between your back plate and top plate, these look like they're even different pieces of wood here.
Yeah. So I have a maple back plate,
Okay.
flame maple. So the grain is running vertically, and then the horizontal structure you see is the flame, so that it's rippling in the wood, which is very important for violin wood. It's kind of what you look for.
The shimmer.
Yeah, and when you move it, it reflects back differently, which we really want to retain in varnishing. We spend a lot of time making sure that we don't freeze the flame so it won't ripple like this. And then the top is spruce, which is much lighter and has very different hard grain and soft grain, which makes doing things like the F-holes really tricky, because the hard grains are very hard and your knife will want to bounce off, and then the soft grains just slide right through. So the unevenness can be tricky, whereas the maple is much more consistent and ends up being easier to cut even though it's harder wood.
Right.
Which is
And-
somehow counterintuitive when you first start, and then you realize that spruce is actually a lot trickier.
That's interesting. And then spruce also, I think the grain is very tight. Maybe the whole concept of choosing wood for what your plate will be. There's kind of like geography, and there's a whole, it's almost its own science in itself.
Yeah, I was lucky this fall. We get a lot of our wood from a supplier in Vermont, actually, who imports it from Europe. And Elliot and I went up and picked out the whole year's supply of wood for the department, which was a really cool field trip of going through this whole barn of wood and selecting all the pieces that we needed and getting to actually pick exactly what we want rather than just what they ship us. So that was a really neat experience, and definitely helped me learn how to sort through wood really quickly and quickly ditch things that I don't want, and then really hone in on what I do want, which is like grain direction in different angles. Everything needs to be super straight, weight, tightness of the grain, and obviously no like knots or resin pockets or things like that. So
Cool. Can I ask you also about the purfling? Like the purfling, also similar to the sound holes, it's beautiful. Is there a practical purpose for purfling?
yeah, it helps stop cracks. So if you have a crack from the edge that's going into the violin, the purfling breaks up the wood, so then it wouldn't travel up into your plate and then potentially cause much more damage if it's traveled up. So because we've cut out wood and added in this new strip, it helps stabilize all those sorts of things.
Nice.
Yeah.
And now I'm also seeing in my frame some of these tools, and are these, did you make the handles for these also?
Yeah, so this handle was one of the very first woodworking projects I did here, my probably second or third week of school. And it's the same maple we use in violins, and then ebony on the outsides, which is super strong and dense and works really well. And we practice all of our woodworking techniques, planing things straight and square to certain thicknesses, drilling holes for these little screws that hold the knife in, gluing things together, shaping it all on the outside. So this was shaped with a block plane and a file and a chisel to get all of these curves. And then we also practice our varnishing on it. So this I've actually varnished a couple times with different things just to see what I like. But we really take time with our knife handles so that we can get some experience before we go into the violin. And then this one is mahogany, which I had an interesting piece of. I think it was from my dad, who's a cabinet maker.
Oh,
who
nice.
given me this, and I'm actually really happy with this one. It has a seam down the side, but it was cut from the same piece of wood, so it really just looks like one thing.
It does. I can't see the seam.
There's a seam like 2/3 of the way over so that we could cut out a groove for the knife. These ones are removable. You just loosen these screws and slide it out to sharpen. This one's actually glued in, so when I sharpen it, it stays in the handle. But I really enjoy doing knife handles, and it's always a great way to practice new varnishes that we're making or new ways of like ground finishes, because they have some amount of curve similar to a violin plate, whereas if you're just using like a strip of rib wood, the curves influence how the varnish behaves. So they're really good practice.
Cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
And then Ada, while we're with you, will you share with us sort of your background and your pathway to coming to North Bennett Street School?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled my entire life, from a kid up through high school, and I spent a lot of time just being able to explore what I was actually interested other than academics. So my dad is a cabinet maker. I grew up in his shop from a tiny child, and I worked for him in high school, which I really enjoyed, and got a good amount of woodworking experience that helped get me started here, even though it was definitely different. And then I also played fiddle, traditional music, for about 10 years before I came. And somehow the combination of the two, woodworking background and music, led me here. I was also a professional hand weaver in high school. Actually wove these bench mats for the
You did?
department. Yeah, over the summer. So I was weaving reproduction textiles for museums and collectors for a few years and really enjoyed it, but ultimately decided I didn't want to keep doing that full time, and violin making felt like a really good fit, combining all the things that I enjoy in one industry. I knew a couple of graduates from here who were in Vermont who told me about Roman and the program and just had great things to say. And I visited here first when I was 17, and
I remember you came with your whole family.
Yeah, my whole family came in, and we toured the school and got to meet current students at that time. And then, yeah, I applied that same fall, and I started when I was 18, as young as you can be to start. I came the first semester, I was old enough. So, yeah.
That's great.
Really glad, and it's all worked out better than I could imagine, for sure, and I'm really looking forward to a career in this industry.
Ada, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Cool. And thank you, Elliot.
Yeah, we can move on to Daniel's bench now.
Okay,
and
great.
catch back up with him, see what he's working on.
All right.
Now that his tools are nice and sharp.
How are you, Daniel?
Good, I'm good. So right now I'm working, I've got two little projects going on right now. This is my first violin. Right now I've got it prepared to put on the fingerboard, which I can show you guys. It's pretty cool, actually.
Cool.
And so I just glued on my saddle, which is this little part down here. You make it out of a piece of ebony, and then you make it square, and you put the little marks in it, and then you glue it in. So I've got that going right now, and then I've got this plate going right now, which I'm working on my corners. And so what I'm doing, what I'm looking for right now is a lot of like symmetry on these corners. I need to make sure that they are similar in width. I need to make sure that they're a correct length from the scribe line that we have here. I'm also making sure that the edge of this is correct and square. So when we check for that, we check to see if it's square, so that when we put our purfling in, it's correct, and that we have a correct amount of overhang when we put this plate on our rib structure, that there's a correct amount of overhang there. But yeah, that's what I have going on right now. It's a little bit tedious at times, because you're making little cuts and then you're checking it, and then you're making little cuts and checking it, but it's fun. I like it.
Cool. And then Daniel, will you share with us sort of your story, your pathway into finding North Bennett Street School and wanting to become a violin maker?
Yeah, so in high school, I've been playing violin since I was 4. I've trained with Suzuki, so classically trained, and so that's been my love and my passion for all of my life. And so I got to high school, I was doing all these music groups, and I kept asking myself, like, what do I want to do after high school and college? I knew that I wasn't cut out for like a regular 4-year school, and like I knew that I wasn't going to do well in there, and so I was looking, and I finally found being a luthier. And it's woodworking and violin combined, which is the two most biggest passions that I have in my life.
Right.
And I contacted the school, and I took a tour. I even talked to Nate, actually, my first tour here. And now we're here. Almost have my first one done. It's been a very, very long process, but very rewarding. I'm very blessed to be here. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. And if I remember correctly, I think you have a wood shop in your basement growing up too.
Yeah. My grandfather had a woodworking benches set up in my basement, and I've gotten very lucky to have that, so that if I ever when during COVID, I could go down there and work and do that. I could take work home with me and work on it there. So I'm very fortunate to have that. Yeah.
Cool. Daniel, thank you so much.
Of course.
Now we'll move on to Hannah. She's doing some arching right now, and
Hi, Hannah.
Hi. I'm actually doing the edge thickness,
oh, my bad.
but it's also kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
The lighting is beautiful on that.
Oh, good. This is actually one of my favorite tools, and this jig thing that's holding my plate, it's called a ball joint jig, and it's a really good example of just how well equipped North Bennett Street is. But without it, I would just be hunched over working on that. But this really protects my back and allows me to sit really comfortably and upright while working. And it's also really good for my wrist in particular, because if I'm doing that, I can just unlock it like that, put it in a different position, work on a different piece. So I'm glad you've come right now. This is definitely one of my favorite tools.
Cool.
Yeah, this is my third violin.
Nice.
Just bringing the edge height down so that I can start to make it, start to work on the arching, which I've roughly started on the back there.
Okay.
Hannah,
Yeah.
you mentioned ergonomics a little bit. Was there a bit of an adjustment for you to get used to working with the tools that we use?
Definitely. At first, random muscles in my wrist or back would hurt. And I think part of the learning process that our teachers here are really good about is making sure that you're learning in a way with healthy habits so that your body can keep doing this as long as you want to. Because I definitely have read about people where they don't necessarily take care of their back and stretch and ergonomically protect their body while they're working, so that you can just keep going.
Yes, so much of the trades are like that, right? You just kind of treat yourself like a shovel, and it's not sustainable. So that's fantastic to hear that you have tools and are being mindful of what this means for you to set you up for long-term success.
Yeah, a lifetime of violin making needs a healthy body
So,
And Hannah, will you tell us your story, your pathway of coming to North Bennett Street School?
yeah, I am one of Rob's longest applicants. It took me 7 or 8 years to finally come here. I applied in high school originally, and I knew that this would be good for me, not because I played viola, but I do love playing viola as well, but because I did painting in high school, and I was very happy to spend like 60 hours in a week or two just painting like one small painting. And this is kind of more of that, where we're just working on one thing to make it as beautiful as we can. It's kind of like the best indulgence ever if you're a perfectionist with your craft.
That's
So,
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm as long as it took, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, I decided to go to college and travel the world for about 7 years before coming, but in the end I was like, I just have to go to North Bennett Street because the violins coming out of here are definitely the best. So,
Let's say hi to Veronica now.
Hi.
Hi, Veronica.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I am finalizing the graduation of my viola backplate right now. So that process is basically establishing the thickness of the plate at each individual section. And I'm pretty much close to the finish line here. All the thicknesses are about what I was aiming for, and more importantly, the flexibility is where I'd like it to be. There's some like guideline numbers that we have in mind as we start, but it's really more important to respond to the individual piece of wood. And this one is a pretty average flexibility weight piece of wood, so I don't have to really manipulate that too much. It's moving the way a backplate should. So right now I'm basically just removing any tooth blade marks that are left and smoothing out, using low light to find all these little ripples and smooth those out. Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned there's measurements that you're working towards, but that there's also the feel as well, that you as the maker are kind of making compromises or making judgments along the way. Is this one of the reasons why the robots will never take over this job?
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely one of those elements where a human hand is necessary to make sure that you're maximizing the potential of the wood and achieving something that's gonna play as best as it can. And yeah, I'm also thinking about this process specifically of smoothing out the final surface a little differently this time, because we recently had a guest lecturer from MIT, the physics department, come, and he was sharing some findings about how, according to their metrics that they were measuring at least, the smoothness of the inside of an instrument shouldn't really affect the sound, again, by their metrics, things like dynamics, resonance. So one of the things that I'm keeping in mind as I'm doing this is more like, pride of craftsmanship,
Right.
you know? Like, you wouldn't be able to see some of the things that I'm working on here just peeking through the F-holes.
But you know.
But I know. And then the other thing is, if this viola maximizes its lifespan, that top is going to get popped off eventually. Like, the bass bar will have
Someone's
to get
going to
replaced.
repair it, and
Right, yeah. So, ideally, this thing is going to live for, a long time. And when somebody does open it up, I want to be able to be proud of, the way it looks and every element.
I feel like when I think about visiting here, it almost seems like it's a salon or a community where if people are interested in thinking about direction or things like that it's almost like it complements the curriculum of actually making. Will you talk about that and specifically to you and what that means?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that I've definitely found it to be the case that we work together as a class to really create a culture of focus and dedication and helping each other out. And it's sort of a stew of all of our personalities and drive that sort of set that tone here. And yeah, it makes it easy to really just come in, put your head down, get work done, and the day kind of flies by, because it is a very specific pursuit. So we all are really dedicated, and you're not going to really stick around too long if you're not in it for the long haul. So yeah.
Cool. And then can I ask you, I'm trying to, I guess, give shape to my own question here. It's like, I'm wondering if when you arrived as a new student here, did you have any idea of what you might want to do when you're graduating? And now that you're, here, has that changed?
Yeah, for sure. I came to North Bennett Street School having just worked at a shop in New York City that focuses mostly on restoration. So I was coming from that environment where I saw just how much restoration work there is out there, and also I was pretty fascinated by the process of it, what I was able to observe while I was there. So I came into school figuring I'd end up focusing on restoration, but through the process of making, it's a pretty easy process to fall in love with. So I'm actually about to move on from school to another shop in New York City and be focusing on restoration after all. But I'm also definitely planning on keeping making in my life. So yeah, it's sort of weave back and forth my vision, but yeah, trying to sort of incorporate it all in the end.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think maybe we could take a peek into the varnish room.
Thank you.
This is our UV light box, and the UV helps the varnish dry faster, and rather than letting it sit out for days on end, we can accumulate coats of varnish quite quickly. And this we had designed, I think Roman designed it himself and put it together. Got our nice box set up with some lights in there.
Oh.
Yep.
So these are violins that are cooking?
Yep, they're accumulating coats and they get put in front of the UV lights. They'll hang out there. Has to be very well vented because the UV lights heat up very quickly. We've got our hot plate and vent set up so we can cook our own varnish. We'll heat oils and make all sorts of finishes in this room, as well as apply those finishes to the instruments themselves. These 3 windows here give us a lot of wonderful natural light. It's a bit dreary today, so not an ideal day for varnishing, but it's still pretty light and airy in here. We've got a couple instruments here as well. They'll tend to go from a lighter color, you accumulate coats, and then they end up being a bit darker and richer in color.
This reminds me of the picture that Ada has on her bench. The
Oh,
kind of two
the two
violins,
instruments, yeah.
the front and the back next to each other.
Definitely. Yeah, the light that we get in here when it's sunny, usually around 9 o'clock in the morning, it's just phenomenal. And it's important to see the instrument in different lights so you can get a sense for how the color might change depending on the lighting situations. Most of the time these instruments won't be outside, but it's good to see a true color represented in that way. We also try to make sure that we look at these varnishes under fluorescent lights and different types of lighting situations so they don't look, if you put too much red in an instrument, let's say, and you have like an orange light under it, it really makes it look almost fluorescent if there's too much color in it. So it can be really nice in one lighting but really terrible in another lighting. So we want to make sure that they look good.
I'm just gonna show people at home a little bit of a close-up of this, even in this light here. And then I think I heard that you sometimes will make your own finishes and that there's some amount of experimentation there, and that apparently Ada has come up with a concoction that everybody's pretty excited about?
Yeah, we're testing some new ways to create the varnish, and it's still, she mentioned testing things on knife handles, and it's still kind of in that stage at the moment, but we're very excited about how promising the work is that she has put into this particular way of making varnish.
Good. And I guess we got to keep that a secret and forget I mentioned it.
There's a bit of like, secret sauce kind of stuff
Yeah.
involved with it, but it's very widely available. When you get into varnish making, it becomes chemistry, and when you study the chemistry and follow the rules, then you can get great results from it. So if you like chemistry, if you like baking, following rules, timings, temperatures, varnish making can be a lot of fun, and sometimes just trying to make the instrument becomes overwhelming enough, so the varnish just kind of gets set aside as an afterthought. But there's so much to be achieved out of it, and so much to learn from it, that if you can carve out the time for yourself, no pun intended, of course,
Yes.
within the program, then it's a really great avenue of research. We all do have to write a paper during our time in the program, and it's side interests like that where you can do a little research and come up with a topic that you're really interested in that you might not get to experience otherwise.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I would love to learn a little bit about the glow forge over here, and I know Roman is here teaching. I'd love to say hello to him and give him a chance to say hello to our audience as well.
Definitely. New to our program this year is a laser cutter that we had received a grant to purchase it, and
It's been named Johann the Glow Forge.
yeah, apparently. We have some creative people here that stick labels on things, and you might think that introducing this kind of technology is not what we want to be doing in like a handmade environment, but
Anti-Luddite.
yeah, and we're not trying to replace any of the craftsmanship values. We're using this as a tool for prototyping templates and tools that will aid us in the creation of the violins. So instead of spending time with the tool making and template making, we can spend time working on the instruments instead.
That's great. So you can make a template there, bring it back to your bench, or bring
Right.
it home to a bench.
Yeah.
And it helps the process go a little bit faster.
Yeah, and we can test out different geometries for templates very quickly. We don't have to spend time making a template by hand and then realizing, oh darn, it's not really exactly what I wanted. So Ada had mentioned that computer-aided design software that we're using in conjunction with this to do some geometric research for templates and really be able to push forward the design aspect of the instrument, so we can come up with more accurate ways of using existing resources as inspiration for what we're working on.
It's a beautiful evolution. I feel like this is something in my visits here, say 5 years plus ago, this kind of technology or ability wasn't here, and that combined with, I would say, probably people like you and Ada and Roman being supportive of moving in this direction is really exciting.
Yeah, it's a technology that can be very easily abused, and there's a large responsibility that comes along with it to maintain what we believe to be the integrity of our craftsmanship. So we like to make sure that people know that we use it very carefully.
Cool. Thank you.
Maybe we can try to go find Roman.
That sounds great.
Cool. Aha, there he is.
Hi, Roman. How are you?
We got ya.
Turn that fan back on.
Hello.
Hey, this is Roman Barnas. He's the head of the program. I also feel like one thing we haven't talked about is in this program, every violin that students make, they get to keep. And I like this as a concept because, you know, you invest in this, so.
Yes, it feels as when we work on the instrument that belongs to us, we put even more into it. It is not at that point just the training piece, but it becomes our own piece. So it becomes more personal, and usually outcome is much, maybe not much, but better than when we don't own the instrument.
And then, Roman, you and I have had a couple conversations recently, and I feel like for the people that are thinking of coming to violin making, we've heard a number of stories from the people that are in the program right now. But I feel like when we talked like a week ago, you had sort of broken down into categories, you know, types of almost like archetypes of people that you see coming. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, naturally, people who are interested in violin making are musicians. Very often they're violinists who like violin. They visit violin shops. They see how the work is done. Some of them get interested in it, and some of them get to the point that they want to do it themselves. So that's a very natural way to go transition into the violin. But there is also another type of person who may be not even a violin player, but they like the engineering part of it, and they wonder why is this little sound box made of wood so mysterious still and sounds so good, and they like to have a crack on it and make a good instrument that sounds as good as possible, hopefully matching the old violins if possible. So this could be an engineer, this could be a person who is just very technically inclined and just wants to make a violin to help him understand what makes it work. There is also artistic type of person who like art, and they like the shape of the violin. There is a lot of carving in the instrument. There's very beautiful design that came from basically Renaissance Baroque in Italy. So this is something that there are aspects of violin that are just plain beautiful, and some people can recognize it and they just want to recreate the same beauty. And of course, we're looking at the varnish, which is another total subject there. To recreate beautiful varnish, it's a lot of alchemy and chemistry going together, and also artistic choices about the colors and recognition. So of the what's nice and what looks nice. So there are these technical engineering types. There is a type of musician who wants to make beautiful violins to play. There are artistic people who just like how it looks. To make a good violin, successful person has to have a little bit of each, and they need to understand certain technical aspects. They need to have a good artistic eye, which we train here for the shapes, and they also have to have a musician because shape in them in some level. They don't have to be players, but it's good to hear music, understand the tonal differences, because eventually we want these instruments to be enjoyed by the musicians and by their audience.
Cool. And Roman, any advice for anyone if they're thinking of coming in this direction of being a maker? What are the things people should be thinking about or doing in order to think about coming in this direction?
I think it's nice to think about this as a career changer, as a serious commitment, time-wise, and it's good to understand that the training takes some time. So it's good to commit solid time into it and be patient with them, with yourself. So if someone wants to come to the violin, make a violin, they need to understand that the process, we can make first violin, the next one is better. So process of building the experience is quite extensive, but then also very rewarding at the end. If we can make nice instrument with good skills, it becomes very pleasant. And
will you share with us a little bit about your your philosophy of teaching or creating a culture here of makers?
Definitely. For us, a successful school and for successful teacher is when they have successful students and graduates. So when we see graduates making nice instruments, getting awards, getting gold medals out there in the big world, their instruments are appreciated by good musicians, or they get hired by very high level and difficult to get violin businesses and violin shops. That's how I feel we are successful. So most of our attention goes into the students, into the school, into the classroom, just to help them out to make the first steps and set them up on the trajectory to making very good work out after graduating.
That's great. Roman, thank you very much. I think that brings us right to the top of the hour. And I just want to say thank you to you, Roman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. And thank you, everybody here in Violin Making and Repair. Appreciate it. And if anybody in the audience wants to buy a violin, right?
We have them here.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.